In this session, we are going to discuss one of the most important topics from quantitative aptitude, and that is percentages. Percentages is so important because there are various other topics like profit and loss, simple interest and compound interest, and data interpretation, where the questions are based on the concepts of percentages. So if we are strong in this particular topic, solving questions from other topics will become easy for us. So let's first understand what is meant by a percentage. Percent means per 100 or for every 100. That is nothing but out of every 100. And we very well know that percentage is denoted by the symbol as shown here. And in short, it can be taken as PC, which means percent. For example, let's say 94%. 94% is nothing but 94 out of 100. So that is what the definition says. Percent means per 100, 94 per 100 or 94 for every 100, or we can say 94 out of 100. Similarly, when we say 85%, it means 85 out of 100, or let's say it is 12%, 12 PC, which means 12%, it is nothing but 12 out of 100. So from all these values, you can see that percentages are nothing but fractions. Every percentage can be taken as a fraction where the denominator is always 100. So one other way of defining percentage is a fraction where the denominator is 100 and the numerator is called rate percent. So we can also say that percentage is a fraction where the denominator is 100, where the denominator is always equal to 100. And the numerator is called rate percent. So this definition again is an important point which will be used in various other topics. So percentage is nothing but per 100 or out of every 100, and it can be taken as a fraction where the denominator is equal to 100. Before we discuss the various concepts from percentages, let us first understand what is the significance of percentage, or why is this concept of percentage used. Let us assume there are two students A and B. In A's exam, he has scored 60 marks, whereas in B's exam, B has scored 80 marks. Now, can you tell me who is a better student? Is it A or B? When we look at the marks, the obvious conclusion is B is a better student than A. Why? Because he has scored 80 marks, which is more than the marks scored by A, that is equal to 60. But friends, remember that comparison can never be done with the actual marks. For example, here our conclusion that B is a better student may be wrong. Let's say the marks scored by A, that is 60, is out of 100. That means the maximum marks in A's exam were 100, whereas the marks scored by B, that is 80, is out of 200. So very clearly, A's maximum score can be 100 and B's maximum score can be 200. So A has scored 60 marks out of 100, whereas B has scored 80 marks out of 200. So now, when we actually try to compare their marks, keeping in mind the maximum scores, we come out with a conclusion that not B, but A is a better student. For example, here A has got 60 out of 100 and B has got 80 out of 200. Now 60 out of 100, as you can see here, this is a fraction where the denominator is 100. So we can say that A's percentage score is 60%. Why? Because it is 60 out of 100. So A has scored 60% marks. And when we try to understand the percentage score of B, we see that B has got 80 out of 200, which is equivalent to 40 out of 100. So we can say that B's percent score or per 100 of score is 40%. And now if we compare their percentage scores, we come with the right conclusion that A is better than B. Why? Because A has scored 60% and B has scored 40%. So from this, it is very clear that the comparison of performance of students should never be done in terms of actual marks. It should always be done in terms of percentage of marks. Why? Because when we say that A has got 60%, it means A has got the capability of scoring 60 marks out of every 100 marks. And B has got the capability of scoring only 40 marks out of every 100. So that is the reason we always use percentage scores when we are comparing the performance of various students. Why? Because here when we take scores in terms of percentages, we are making the scale common for all the students. That means the scale for the percentage of marks is always from 0 to 100. So that is the reason we always use percentage scores when we are comparing the performance of various students. The point here is whenever we use percentage scores, the scale of performance is common for all the students irrespective of their maximum marks. Why? Because percentage is from 0 to 100. So their percentage score should always lie in between 0 to 100. And hence the comparison would be proper if we go for percentages. Similarly, even when we calculate profit or loss, we generally calculate in terms of percentages so that the understanding is very simple. For example, let's say that a businessman makes a profit of 20%. Now 20% is nothing but 20 out of 100. So very clearly we can understand that for every 100 rupees which the businessman has invested in his business, he has made a profit of 20 rupees. Similarly, when we say that loss of a person is 5%, it means it is 5 rupees out of every 100 rupees. So for every 100 rupees that has been invested in the business, the loss was 5 rupees. So wherever we use percentages, the idea is to make the comparison or the understanding simple. So that is the significance of percentages. Let us now move on to understand how to calculate a percentage value. Having learned that percentage is nothing but a fraction where the denominator is 100, let us now understand how to convert the given percentage into a fraction, and similarly how to express the given fraction in terms of percentage. For example, 50% is nothing but 50 out of 100, and 50 by 100 it can be taken as 1 by 2. So we can say that 50% is equal to 1 by 2. Similarly, 25%, which is 25 out of 100, is equal to 1 by 4. Since this is 25 into 1 and 25 into 4. So we can understand that 25% is 1 by 4. So this is how to convert a percentage into a fraction. We need to divide the percentage value by 100. Let's say we have to find out how much is 30% in terms of fraction. So simply we can take 30 divided by 100, and by simplifying this we get 3 by 10. So we can say that 30% is equal to 3 by 10. So a percentage here has been converted into a fraction simply by dividing the given value by 100. And now let us understand how to convert the fraction into percentage. For example, let's say the given fraction is 3 by 8. Now to convert this fraction into percentage, what we need to do is simply multiply the given fraction with 100. So 3 by 8 into 100 will be equal to 37.5. So this can be taken as 37.5%. Similarly, we have the fraction 2 by 5. Now to convert 2 by 5 into percentage, what we need to do is multiply this fraction with 100. So 2 by 5 into 100 will be equal to 40, and this is 40%. So this is how a fraction can be converted to percentage, by multiplying the given value with 100. And here again the fraction has been converted to percentage upon multiplication with 100. So from this we can very clearly understand that there is a definite relationship between a percentage and a fraction. A given percentage can be expressed in terms of fraction by dividing by 100, and a fraction can be expressed in terms of percentage by multiplying with 100. Let us now learn how to do calculations related to percentages. For example, let's take x% of y. Now this will be equal to, we know that x% is nothing but x out of 100 or per 100. So x out of 100 into y. So this will be xy by 100. So we can say that x% of y should be equal to xy by 100. For example, 40% of 600 can be taken as 40 upon 100 multiplied by 600. So as zeros get cancelled, we can say that 40% of 600 will be equal to 40 into 6, which is 240. So 40% of 600 is equal to 240. So this is what is important, how to calculate a percentage value for a given value. That is x% of y is equal to xy by 100. Now as we can see here, we find three types of values in the given equation. One is a percentage value, that is 40%. The other one is 600, which is nothing but the value on which we are calculating the percentage. So it can be taken as the maximum value. And the third one here is 240, which is the actual value or the absolute value. So in any given percentage calculation, we have these three types of values. One is a percentage value, the other one is the maximum value, and the third one is the absolute value. So out of these three, any two will be given and we can calculate the third one. For example, in some cases, the question may be 60% of what is going to be 360. Now to find out the answer, let's say 60% is 60 upon 100 into this question mark can be taken as x equals to 360. So 60 gets cancelled 6 times here. So we can say that x will be equal to 6 into 100, 600. So very clearly 60% of 600 is 360. So here again we can see that the percentage value and the actual value was given, from which we can find out the maximum value. Similarly, what percent of 900 will be equal to 720? Now in this case, let's say this is x percent. So it can be taken as x by 100 into 900 equals to 720. So as zeros gets cancelled, we can say that x equals to 720 by 9, which is 80. So 80% of 900 is equal to 720. So as you can see from these three calculations, the first one was 40% of 600 is equal to what? So we were able to find out the answer, that is 240. In the second calculation, we find that 60% of what is equal to 360. So here the percentage value and the absolute value was given and we have found the maximum value. And in the last calculation here, what percent of 900 is equal to 720? So in this case, the maximum value and the actual value was given and we are able to find out the percentage value as 80%. And all these calculations are based on the above equation, that is x percent of y should be equal to xy by 100. Always the maximum value can be taken as 100% and accordingly the other percentage value can be calculated. For example, in the first case here we had 40% of 600. Now this 600, which is the maximum value, can be taken as 100% and we are supposed to find out 40% of the maximum value. So instead of doing the calculation in this way, we can say that 100% is equal to 600. So 40% will be equal to what? Now by cross multiplying this, we can find out the answer as 40 into 600 by 100, which is equal to 240, which is equal to the answer that we have obtained in the given equation. Similarly, in the second case, we find that 60% of what is equal to 360. Now as you can see here, the maximum value has not been given, but the equation says 60% of that is equal to 360. So very clearly 60% is 360 and we are supposed to find out 100%. So now we can say that 60% is equivalent to 360, 100% will be equal to what? Again by cross multiplying we can find out the required answer. So we can say that this should be equal to 100 into 360 divided by 60. So which again comes out to be 600, as 60 goes 6 times here. And in the last case again, what percent of 900 is equal to 720 was the given equation. And as you can see here, the maximum value is 900. So very clearly 100% is 900. And we are supposed to find out what percent of that maximum is equal to 720. So 100% is given and what percent is 720 is to be calculated. So now we can say that 100% is equal to 900. So what percent will be equal to 720? So again by cross multiplying we can say that this should be equal to 100 into 720 divided by 900, which comes out to be 80. So 80% of 900 will be 720. That is what is the answer in the given equation. So we can say that 80% of 900 is equal to 720. So as you can see here, going by the equation, always x% of y is equal to xy by 100, where either the maximum value or the percentage value or the absolute value has to be calculated. So as you can see here, in these three formats, we find that always a percentage value has been given and the other percentage has to be calculated. So simply by cross multiplication, we can find out the required answer. So friends, one important point that you need to understand here is, in every question of percentages, always one of the percentage value is specified and the other percentage value is to be calculated. And that can be done simply with the help of cross multiplication. So going by this way of calculation, we can solve the questions very quickly. The next point that we need to understand here is x% of y is same as y% of x. Let us understand how is it possible. We know that x% of y is equal to xy by 100. Now xy by 100 can be taken as y into x by 100. Why? Because x into y is same as y into x. And now if we try to split it as y by 100 into x, we can take it as y%, since y by 100 is nothing but a fraction where the denominator is 100. So we can take it as y% into x. So this is equal to y% of x. So we find that x% of y is equal to y% of x. So always remember that x% of y can always be taken as y% of x. This point may be useful in doing certain calculations. For example, we need to find out what is 36% of 50. Now instead of finding out 36% of 50, if we take it as 50% of 36, the calculation would be much faster. Why? Because 50% of 36 is nothing but half of 36, which is equal to 18. So that is how when we take x% of y as y% of x, some calculations of these type will be done much faster. Why? Because 36% of 50 takes some time to calculate, but 50% of 36 is simply half of 36, which is equal to 18. Let us now understand how to increase or decrease a given value by some percentage. For example, let us assume that some original value is equal to x. Now when this value x is increased or decreased by some percentage, for example, let's take the increase or decrease in the percentage. It is increased or decreased by p%. Then the new value can be taken as x plus or minus p% of x. That is nothing but original value plus or minus p% of the original value. We should use plus when it has increased and we should use minus when it has decreased. So for example, let's say some value x has increased by p%. Then the new value can be taken as x plus p% of x. Similarly, if it has decreased by some percentage p, then the new value can be taken as x minus p% of x. For example, let's say that A's salary is equal to 40,000. A's salary is equal to 40,000. Now when his salary has increased by 25%, the new salary, let us take it as new salary, A's new salary as AN, it can be taken as 40,000, that is the original salary, plus 25% of original salary, which is 40,000. Now we know that 25% of 40,000 is equal to 10,000. So this can be taken as 40,000 plus 10,000, which comes out to be 50,000 rupees. Similarly, let's say that his salary is decreased by 20%. If the salary has decreased by 20%, then the new salary AN can be taken as the original salary, which is 40,000 minus 20% of 40,000. We are using minus sign because here it is a decrease of 20%. So 20% of 40,000 is 8,000. So 40,000 minus 8,000 will be equal to 32,000 rupees. So this is how we can increase or decrease a given value by p% as original value plus or minus p% of the original value. We should use plus for an increase in the value and minus for a decrease in the given value. So these various points that we have discussed so far will be used in solving various questions from percentages. Let us now take the first model from percentages, which is a very common question in bank exams, where we are supposed to find out the total salary of a person based on his monthly budget. The given question here is, Samir spends 20% of his monthly salary on house rent, 25% on food, 10% on transportation, 15% on education of his children, and 18% on household expenses. He saves the remaining amount of rupees 4,800. What is his monthly salary? So as you can see here, the monthly budget distribution of Samir has been given here, and it says that he can save an amount of rupees 4,800 every month. And from this, we are supposed to find out what is his total salary. Now, as discussed earlier, monthly salary, which is nothing but the maximum value or the total value, can be taken as 100%. So let us assume that his monthly salary is equal to 100%. Now let us find out the total expenditure of Samir. So the total expenditure here can be taken as 20% on house rent plus 25% on food plus 10% on transportation and 15% on education of his children and 18% on household expenses. So altogether the total expenditure here is 20 plus 25, 45 plus 10, 55 plus 15, 70 plus 18, that is 88%. So we can say that the total monthly expenditure of Samir is 88%. Now we know that his monthly salary is 100%, out of which 88% has been spent. So it is obvious that his savings will be equal to 100% minus his total expenses, that is 88%, which comes out to be 12%. And in the given question, it is clearly given that he saves the remaining amount. The remaining amount is nothing but 12%, which is equal to 4,800. So his monthly savings are 4,800, which should be equivalent of 12%. And the question is, what is his monthly salary? So here we know that 12% is equivalent to 4,800, and we are supposed to find out his monthly salary, which is 100%. So if 12% is 4,800, 100% will be equal to what? As discussed earlier, we know one percentage value, the other percentage value has to be calculated. So simply cross multiply to get the answer. So here we can say that his monthly salary will be equal to 4,800 into 100 divided by 12, which comes out to be 40,000 rupees. So we can say that his total monthly salary is 40,000 rupees. Similarly, sometimes the question may be, what is his house rent? We know that his house rent is 20%. So we can say that if 12% is 4,800, 20% is equal to what? And again by cross multiplication we can find out the house rent. Or for that matter, any other value can be calculated simply by taking the proper percentage and doing the cross multiplication. So this is how we can solve such basic questions from percentages, by assuming that the total monthly salary is 100% and finding out the required percentage. Let us now take the second example from model 1. The given question here is, Gaurav spends 40% of the amount he received from his father on hostel expenses, 20% on books and stationery, and 50% of the remaining on transport. He saves rupees 450, which is half of the remaining amount after spending on hostel expenses, books and stationery and transport. How much money did he get from his father? So again, as you can see here, the monthly budget of Gaurav has been given and we are supposed to find out the total amount that he has received from his father. Now as discussed earlier, let us assume that the total amount is 100%. So total amount what he has got from his father is 100%. Now he has spent 40% on hostel expenses, 20% on books and stationery, and 50% of the remaining on transport. So for hostel expenses and books and stationery, the total amount spent is 40% plus 20%, which is equal to 60%. That means out of 100% that he has got from his father, 40% has gone for hostel expenses and 20% for books and stationery. So which is equal to 60%. Now after spending 60%, the remaining amount is nothing but 40%. Why? Because total is 100%. So 100% minus 60% will be equal to 40%. Now the next part of the question says 50% of the remaining on transport. We have already taken into account the 40% which has been spent on hostel expenses and 20% on books and stationery. After this, 50% of the remaining was spent on transport. We know that the remaining amount in our case is 40%. So we can say that the amount spent on transport is 50% of remaining, which is nothing but 50% of 40%. 50% of 40%. Now this is like percentage of percentage. We know that 50% of 40 is 20. 50% is half. So half of 40 is 20. So 50% of 40 is 20. So we can say that 50% of 40% should be 20%. So this will be equal to 20%. So we can now say that hostel expenses and books and stationery together was 60%, and on transport he has spent 20%. So altogether for hostel expenses and books and stationery and the transport, the total amount spent is equal to 60% plus 20%. 60% plus 20%, that is equal to 80%. Now going by the next part of the question, he saves rupees 450, which is half of the remaining amount after spending on hostel expenses, books and stationery and transport. So after spending on these three areas, hostel expenses, books and stationery and transport, the remaining amount is 20%. Why? Because the total of these three expenses is 80%. So we can say that the remaining amount is 100%. Remaining amount after this will be equal to 20%, that is 100% total minus these three expenses 80%, which is equal to 20%. And the next part of the question says he says 450, which is half of the remaining amount. We know that this remaining amount here is equal to 20%, and Gaurav saves 450, which is half of 20%. So half of 20% is equal to 10%, and which is equivalent to 450 rupees as given in the question. And we are supposed to find out how much money did he get from his father. We very well know that the total amount that he got from his father is 100%. So 100% is equal to what has to be calculated. So we know that 10% is 450, 100% equals to what? So by cross multiplication we can say that this value will be equal to 4,500 rupees. Why? Because 10% into 10 will give us 100%. So 450 into 10 should give us the equivalent amount. 450 into 10 is 4,500. So this is how we can solve these questions based on the monthly expenses of a family or an individual, by considering the total amount to be 100% and then finding out the remaining amount or whatever required as per the question. Let us now take the second model from this topic, which is based on calculation of a percentage of a percentage. Let's look at this. X% of Y% of K is equal to XY by 100% of K. For example, 40% of 60% of some value, let us take 3000, can be taken as 40 into 60, that is X into Y. So 40 into 60 divided by 100% of 3000. Now 40 into 60 by 100 is equal to 24, 4624. So this is 24% of 3000, and 24% of 3000 will be equal to 720. So we can say that 40% of 60% of 3000 is equal to 720. So this is where we need to understand how to use percentage of percentage. This calculation of percentage is as good as finding out a percentage value. For example, let us forget about the second percentage symbol here. So we find that this is 40% of 60. We know that 40% of 60 is 24. So 40% of 60% will be 24%. So either you can use the formula or directly we can find out the percentage here and then take that percentage for the given value. For example, let's say we need what is 50% of 80% of some value X. Now 50% of 80% is nothing but 40%. Why? Because 50% of 80 is 40. So 50% of 80% should be 40%. So 40% of X will be the answer. So in various questions we find that percentage of percentage is required, and this is how we can do the calculation. That is X% of Y% of some value will be equal to XY by 100% of that value. Let us now take an example which is based on the concept of percentage that we have just discussed. The question here is, Prerna decided to donate 30% of her monthly income to an orphanage. But on the day of donation, she changed her mind and donated rupees 4,200, which is 70% of what she had earlier decided. So what should be the actual donation as per her earlier decision? Now, as given in the question, Prerna decided to donate 30% of her monthly income. That means her earlier decision to donate was 30%. But on the day of donation, she has donated only 4,200, which is 70% of what she had earlier decided. Now we know that her earlier decision was to donate 30%. That means this 4,200 which has been donated is 70% of earlier decision, which is 70% of 30%. So we can clearly understand that 70% of 30% is equivalent to 4,200 as given in the question. Now, going by the concept of percentage, we can say that 70% of 30% is nothing but 70 into 30 by 100%, which is equal to 21%. And this is given as 4,200. And we are supposed to find out what should be the actual donation as per our earlier decision. We very well know that the actual donation has to be 30% because that was our earlier decision. So we are supposed to find out 30% is equivalent to what? So we know that 21% is 4,200, 30% should be what? So again, by cross multiplication, we can say that this should be equal to 30 into 4,200 divided by 21. Now this goes 2 times. So the answer here will be 6,000 rupees. So the actual donation has to be 6,000, but she has donated only 4,200, which is 70% of the actual donation. So this is how we can use percentage in solving such questions. One point which you can understand here, friends, is that the question appears to be lengthy, but the solution here is in just one single step. That is, one percentage value is given and the other percentage equivalent value has to be calculated. So what we always need to do in this topic is find out what percentage equivalent has been mentioned and accordingly find out the other percentage equivalent with the help of cross multiplication. Let us now take one more example from model 2, which is based on percentage of percentage. The question here is, the price of a car is rupees 5 lakhs. It was insured for 90% of its price. The car got completely damaged in an accident and the insurance company paid only 80% of the insured amount. What is the difference between the price of the car and the amount of insurance received? So here we are supposed to find out the difference between the price of the car and the amount of insurance that has been received after the accident of the car. Now as given in the question, the price of the car is rupees 5 lakhs. We can take this 5 lakhs equivalent to 100%. That is nothing but the total amount is 100%, which is 5 lakhs. Now it was insured for 90% of its price. That means it was insured for 90% of 5 lakhs. The car got completely damaged in an accident and the insurance company paid only 80% of the insured amount. Now remember, friends, the company paid 80% of the insured amount. We very well know that the insured amount is only 90% but not the total value of the car. So we can clearly understand that the company paid 80% of 90%. That is nothing but the insured amount. So from this we need to find out the difference between price of the car and the amount of insurance received. So very clearly the insurance that the person will receive here will be equal to 80% of the insured amount, which is nothing but 90%. So here the calculation is 80% of 90%. We know that 80% of 90% will be equal to 72% with the help of the equation for percentage of percentage. That is, x% of y% is xy by 100%. So 80% of 90% will be equal to 72%. So very clearly the insurance that is received is only 72%. Generally, some students commit a mistake here by taking the difference as price of the car 100% and amount of insurance 80%. So 100 minus 80, 20% is the wrong calculation because insurance received is only 72% but not 80%. And the price of the car as we have taken is equal to 100%. So we know that the difference between these two values will be 100% minus 72%, which is equal to 28%. Now this 28% is equal to what has to be calculated, and we know that 100%, that is the price of the car, is 5 lakhs. So So from this, by cross multiplication, we can say that 28% will be equal to 28 into 5 lakhs divided by 100, which is equal to 1,40,000 rupees. So the difference between the actual value of the car and the amount of insurance received will be 1,40,000 rupees. So this is how we can use percentage of percentage concept in solving various questions of this type. Let us now discuss the next model from percentages, which is based on an election between two persons. These type of questions have been very frequently asked in the previous bank exams, and it is quite easy to solve. Let us look at the first example. In an election between two candidates, the winner secured 58% of the total votes cast and wins by a majority of 2,400 votes. How many votes did the loser get? So as the question says, the election was between two candidates and the winner has got 58% of the total votes. Now as discussed earlier, total can always be taken as 100%. So let us assume that the total votes cast is equivalent to 100%. And we know that the winner has secured 58% of the votes. So winner has secured 58% of the votes. Now the most important point here is that the election is between two candidates. So it is obvious that each of the votes will either go to the winner or the loser. Now since the winner has got 58% of the votes, it is very clear that the loser will be getting the remaining percent of votes. That is 100% total number of votes minus the winner's percentage, which is equal to 42%. So 58% has been obtained by winner and remaining 42 has been obtained by the loser. The next part of the question says the person wins by a majority of 2,400 votes. Now what is majority? It is nothing but the difference between the number of votes of the two persons. So we can say that majority is equal to the number of votes obtained by winner minus the number of votes obtained by loser. We very well know that winner has obtained 58% of the votes and the loser has got the remaining percentage, that is 42%. So very clearly the majority here, 58% minus 42%, is equal to 16%. And as given in the question, this 16% is equivalent to 2,400. So we can say that 16% is as good as 2,400 votes. And we are supposed to find out how many votes did the loser get. We very well know that loser has obtained 42% of the votes. So if 16% is equivalent to 2,400, 42% will be equivalent to what? By cross multiplication, we get the required answer. So we can say that the answer here should be 42 into 2,400 divided by 16. So this is 8 into 3, 8 into 2, and this goes 21 times. So 21 into 3 is 63 into 100, 6,300. So we can say that the loser has got 6,300 votes. Similarly, suppose the question says what were the total number of votes cast. So what do we do there? We know that 16% is 2,400, total number of votes is 100%. So 100% is equal to what? So as you can see here, again the question here is about one of the percentage equivalent is given and the other percentage equivalent has to be calculated. So this is how we can solve questions based on election by considering the total number of votes to be 100% and finding out the shares of the winner and the loser respectively. Let us now take the second example from the model that we have just discussed. The question here is, in a college election between two students, 10% of the votes cast are invalid. The winner gets 70% of the valid votes and defeats the loser by 1,800 votes. How many votes were totally cast? So as you can see here, the election is between two students. Let us assume that the total number of votes cast is equivalent to 100%. Now as given in the question, 10% the votes cast are invalid. So very clearly the invalid votes will be equal to 10%. Now from this we can say that the number of votes which were valid will be equal to total, that is 100%, minus the percentage of invalid votes, which is 10%. So this comes out to be 90%. Now moving on to the next part of the question, the winner gets 70% of the valid votes. So the winner here will be getting 70% of valid votes, which is equal to 90%. So now we can say that the winner has got 70% of 90%. And going by the concept of percentages of percentage that we have discussed earlier, we know that 70% of 90% will be equal to 70 into 90 by 100%, which comes out to be 63%. So the winner has got 63% of the votes. And now we can find out the number of votes obtained by the loser as the valid votes, which is 90% minus the votes obtained by the winner, which is equal to 90% minus 63%. That comes out to be 27%. So very clearly the winner has got 63% of the votes, loser has obtained 27%, which the total comes out to be 90%, and remaining 10% were invalid votes. And the next part of the question is, the winner defeats the loser by 1800 votes. So as discussed in the previous example, majority is nothing but the percentage of votes obtained by winner minus those obtained by loser. So 63% minus 27% is equal to 36. And this 36% is equivalent to 1800 votes. So we can say that 36% is same as 1800. And we are supposed to find out how many votes were totally cast. We know that the total number of votes cast are 100%. So 100% will be equal to what? So again, by cross multiplication, we can find out the required answer. So the total number of votes here will be equal to 100 into 1800 upon 36, which comes out to be 5000 votes. So the total number of votes cast are 5000. Similarly, here instead of asking how many votes were totally cast, the question could be what were the total number of valid votes. We know that the total number of valid votes is equivalent to 90%. So we can say that 36% is equivalent to 1800, 90% will be equivalent to what? And again by cross multiplication we can get the desired answer. So friends, this is how you solve these type of questions based on election, simply by finding out what percentage equivalent has been given and what percentage equivalent has to be calculated. And by cross multiplication we find out the required answer. The only point that you need to be careful here is that because the valid votes are 90% and the question says winner gets 70% of the valid votes, do not misunderstand that the loser has obtained remaining 20%. 90 minus 70, 20 should not be taken as the percentage of votes obtained by loser. Why? Because winner has got 70% of the valid votes, not 70% of the total votes. So we should take it as 70% of 90% but not 70% of 100%. Let us now take the fourth model from percentages. The one very important concept that we need to understand here is X is what percent of Y. Now this particular model is very frequently asked in data interpretation. Now X is what percent of Y can always be taken as X by Y into 100. So whenever we see a question which is in the format of X is what percent of Y, the answer should always be taken as X upon Y into 100. For example, let's say we are talking about the strength of a class. So the question is boys are what percent of the total strength. So what we need to do, boys are what percent of the total strength. So as you can see here, X is nothing but the number of boys and Y is the total strength. So the answer here should be boys by the total strength into 100. Similarly, if the question says the number of students who have passed is what percent of the total number of students. So we can take it as number of students passed by total number of students into 100. So whenever we find a question in this format, that is X is what percent of Y, always take it as X by Y into 100. The other ways of asking the same question here is what percent of Y is X. Now this is as good as X is what percent of Y. What you can see here is what percent of Y is X. So the answer again remains X by Y into 100. Similarly, it can also be taken in terms of what percent is X of Y. Answer again is X by Y into 100. One simple way to remember the formula here is that whatever is followed by of should always be taken in the denominator. For example, as you can see here, X is what percent of Y. So that Y goes in the denominator. Similarly, in the second case, what percent of Y is X. So the answer again is X by Y into 100. So as you can see here, whatever is followed by of goes in the denominator. And even in the last case, what percent is X of Y. So of is followed by Y and that Y is taken in the denominator. So let's say if the question is R is what percent of K, the answer should be R by K into 100. Why? Because we are asking R is what percent of K. Or the given question is what percent of Z is M. So what percent of Z is M. Answer here should be m by z into 100, but not z by m into 100. So one simple point here is whatever follows by of has to be taken in the denominator. And this model is very frequently asked when we go for data interpretation. Let us now take an example based on the model that we have just discussed. That is, x is what percent of y should be equal to x by y into 100. The question here is, in an examination, Ramesh scored 30% less than Suresh and Mahesh scored 20% less than Suresh. So Ramesh's score is what percent of Mahesh's score. So as you can see here, the given question, Ramesh's score is what percent of Mahesh's score, is in the form of x is what percent of y. So our answer here should be Ramesh's score by Mahesh's score into 100. Now the question says Ramesh scored 30% less than Suresh and Mahesh scored 20% less than Suresh. No way in the question either the marks of Ramesh, Mahesh or Suresh have been specified. So what we can do here is, let us assume that Suresh's score is equivalent to 100%. Why? Because we are comparing Ramesh's score and Mahesh's score with Suresh's score. So let us take the reference, that is Suresh's score, as 100%. Now as it says, Ramesh scored 30% less than Suresh. So we can say that Ramesh's score should be 100% minus 30%, which should be equal to 70%. And similarly, Mahesh scored 20% less than Suresh. So Mahesh's score can be taken as 100% minus 20% of 100%, that is equal to 20%. So 100% minus 20% is 80%. Now we have to find out Ramesh's score is what percent of Mahesh's score. The answer here should be Ramesh's score by Mahesh's score into 100. Now as we know that Ramesh's score is equivalent to 70%, we can take this as 70% upon Mahesh's score is equivalent to 80% into 100. So this can be taken as 7 by 8 into 100. And from the knowledge of fractions, we must be able to say that 7 by 8 is equal to 87.5%. So we can say that Ramesh's score is 87.5% of Mahesh's score. So this is how we can apply the concept, that is x is what percent of y, in solving certain questions. But generally, this concept is more frequently asked when it comes to data interpretation. Let us now discuss the fifth model from this topic of percentages, where we learn how to find that a given value is what percentage more or less than some other value. Let's look at the concept here. X is what percent more or less than y, and it is given as x minus y by y into 100. So wherever we have a question in this format which says x is what percentage more than y, or x is what percent less than y, or sometimes it is generally given as x is what percentage more or less than y, right? We'll have to find out how much percentage more or what percentage less. So simple formula here is x minus y by y into 100, right? To give you an example, let's say profit in 2015 is what percentage more or less than profit in 2014, right? Generally these type of questions are asked in data interpretation, right? And obviously the profits will be given to you either in the table or the graphs there. So profit in 2015 is what percent more or less than profit in 2014. So x is the profit of 15 and y is the profit of the year 14. What do? Profit in 2015 minus the profit of 2014 divided by profit of 2014 into 100. So basically the numerator is the difference of the two values, x minus y, profit of 2015 minus profit of 2014 divided by profit of 2014 into 100. Just simplify this and you get the required answer. Remember that the answer can be positive or negative, right? It all depends on the difference here. If the profit in 2015 is more than that in 2014, we get a positive answer. If it is less, then we get a negative answer. So simply, whenever we get a negative answer here, we can understand that x is some percentage less than y. Let's say the calculation here is minus 20%. It indicates x is 20% less than y. And if it is plus 20%, it means x is 20% more than y. So based on the sign there, we can decide whether x is more or less than y. Now, an important point to be noted here is that in the denominator, we should always take y. Understand, x is what percentage more or less than y. We are comparing with y. So that is the reason the denominator should always have y here. So simply difference by y into 100. Difference divided by y into 100, right? So like we have seen in the previous model there. Model 4, we have looked at x is what percent of y, or what percent of y is x, what percent is x of y. In all these three cases, we take y in the denominator, and our The simple understanding was whatever comes after of, whatever is followed by of, that goes in the denominator. Similarly, whatever is followed by than, that goes in the denominator here, right? For example, population of country A is what percentage more than population of country B, than population of country B. So country B's population should go in the denominator there. So that's about the concept of model 5. Let us now look at a few examples based on this concept. Let us now take the first example from model 5. If A's salary is 25% more than B's salary, then by what percent is B's salary less than A's salary? Now this is a very popular question, especially in bank exams, right? So how do we solve it? It says A is 25% more than B. Then by what percent is B less than A? We have just discussed this concept, right? X is what percentage more or less than Y. So here B is what percentage less than A, right? So we can apply the formula B minus A by A into 100, right? Now before we actually solve it, one important point to be noted here is, since A is 25% more than B, it does not mean that B is 25% less than A. Many students commit this mistake, right? They say if A is 25% more than B, then B has to be 25% less. Understand, when it comes to percentages, it is not true. See, if A is, let's say, 30 rupees more than B, then B will be 30 rupees less than A. Absolute values, it will always satisfy, but percentage values will not satisfy this point here, right? If A is 25% more than B, does not mean that B is 25% less than A. It will be something else. So let's understand how to solve this question, right? Point to be noted is 25% less is not the answer. So what do? A is 25% more than B. Let us assume that B is equal to 100. B's salary is 100 rupees. It is not given, we are just assuming that B is 100. The question says A is 25% more than B. So A can be taken as B plus 25% of B, right? We have discussed how to increase or decrease with respect to a particular value and given percentage. A is 25% more than B. So B plus 25% of B. How much is B? 100. 25% of B, 25. Right? 25% of 100 is 25. 100 plus 25, 125. So now we know that A is equal to 125. If B is 100, then A will be 125. So if you look at these two values, it satisfies the given criteria, right? It says A should be 25% more. Yes, 125 is 25% more than 100. But the question says, by what percent is B less than A? By what percent is B less than A? Now, based on the concept that we have discussed, how do we solve this? B minus A by A into 100. Remember, we are comparing with A, less than A. So the denominator should have A. Numerator will be the difference, denominator should have A. Let us substitute the values. So B minus A, 100 minus 125 upon A. What is A here? 125 into 100. Now 100 minus 125 is minus 25. Minus 25 by 125. So this is 1 by 5. Actually minus 1 by 5 into 100. Why are we getting a negative sign here? Why do we get a minus sign? Because B is less than A, right? So answer has to be negative, right? So no need to worry when you get a negative answer here. It only indicates that B is less than A. B is some percentage less than A. Now 1 by 5, from our knowledge in speed maths, we know that 1 by 5 is 20 percentage in terms of percentage. So your answer here will be minus 20%, or we can say B is 20% less than A. So that's how you can solve this question using the regular method, where we assume that B is equal to 100, accordingly calculate A, and then take the change of A with respect to B or B with respect to A. Now you may get a question here, why did we take B as 100? How do we know that B is 100? Well, we have no idea about what B is. We are assuming that B is 100. You can assume any value. You can take 200, 150, 98, 95, whatever you want. Accordingly, calculate the value of A. Final answer will always come out to be 20%, right? The only advantage of taking B as 100 is calculation becomes easier, right? If B is 100, A will be 125, 25%. And then you can simplify it very quickly, right? So that's the regular way of solving the question, the traditional method, where we have assumed B as 100. But then there's another way in which, without assuming any value for B, we can simplify the question there. We can solve the question. So let's look at the second method of solving this question, right? A smart way of answering this question. What do? The question says A is 25% more than B, right? So we can say A is equal to, like we have discussed here, B plus 25% of B. But instead of 25%, I'll take it as fraction. Now in the second method, we'll be using fractions in place of percentages. So A will be B plus 25% of B. We can take it as B plus 1/4 of B. So 25% is 1/4 of B. Now what is B plus 1/4 of B? 1/4 of B. 5b by 4 or 5 by 4b, right? So which means a is equal to 5 by 4b, right? 1 plus 1 by 4 gives you 5 by 4. So a is 5 by 4b. 5 by 4 if you convert to percentage, you will get 125 percentage, which is what is given in the question there. A is 25 percentage more. So obviously a will be 125 percentage of b. Yes or no? A is 25% more than b does not mean that a is equal to 25 percentage of b. It means a is 125 percentage of b, which is 5 by 4b. Now if a is 5 by 4b, it is obvious that b is equal to 4 by 5a. Just take it to the other side. So b will be equal to 4a by 5 or 4 by 5a. Let us convert this fraction into percentage. We all know that 4 by 5 is 80% from our knowledge of percentages and its equivalent fractions. 4 by 5 is 80%. So we can conclude that b is 80% of a. b is 80% of a. Look at it. b is only 80% of a. So how much less than a? 20% less than a. Yes or no? 80% of a can be split as 100% of a minus 20% of a. Right? We can take it as a minus 20% of a. A itself is 100% of a, right? So 100% of a minus 20% of a. So which means it is 20% less. That's what we have got here, right? Minus 20%. So we can conclude that b is 20% less than a. So this is the method where without assuming any value for b, we can solve the given question here. Just you need to convert the percentages to fractions. So we are using this conversion of percentages to fractions to solve this. So 5 by 4b, which becomes 4 by 5a. 4 by 5 is only 80%. Let's say we get only 95%. B is only 95%. 95% of A means it is 5% less than A. So your answer will be 5% less. Very, very easy to follow this. But then we have another method which is much easier than what we have done in the second method. We have already discussed two. Both are correct, right? You can follow whichever is convenient for you. But then there is a third method which takes less than 5 seconds for you to arrive at the answer. We need not put pen on paper at all, right? Without doing any paperwork, you can simplify the given question there. You can solve the given question. So let's see how we will do this. Now this is basically a technique, a kind of trick that you need to follow for answering such questions. See what to do. Look at the question. A's salary is 25% more than B's salary. A's salary is 25% more than B's salary. So let's take this 25%, the given value there, 25%. How much is this in terms of fractions? 1 by 4. 25% more. 25% is 1 by 4. Now look at the actual question. By what percent is B's salary less than A's salary, right? Focus on this term now, right? We have to find out by what percent is B's salary less than A's salary. Some percentage is given, we have converted to fraction. Now we are looking for another percentage. And that percentage will indicate by what percent is B less than A. Less than A. Basically, we have to reduce this fraction. Less, right? Reduce this fraction. Right? Already we have a fraction, reduce that. We are looking for lesser value. Now, how do you reduce a fraction? There are multiple ways of doing it. To reduce a fraction, you can either reduce the numerator. So when you reduce the numerator, the fraction value decreases. Right? Fraction reduces. Or you can increase the denominator. The fraction decreases. Or you can do both. Reduce the numerator and also increase the denominator. Fraction will decrease. But then, while answering such questions, remember, we'll only work on the denominator. We'll never work on numerator. We should only work on the denominator. Now I have to reduce this fraction. I'll only do something to the denominator to reduce it. I'll not touch the numerator. We should not touch the numerator. So the only choice we have is to increase the denominator. See, my requirement is to reduce the fraction. I want a lesser value. So I'll increase the denominator. We'll increase the denominator. Now the question that arises is, by how much will you increase it? 1 by 4 will become, see, numerator will remain as it is. We will not touch the numerator. So 1 remains 1. Increase the denominator. So 4 plus something. What is that something? That something is nothing but the value given in the numerator. What is the numerator here? 1. So increase by 1. If the numerator is 2, increase by 2. If the numerator is 3, increase by 3. Whatever is the value in the numerator, increase the denominator by the same value. So 1 by 4 becomes 1 by 4 plus 1, which is nothing but 1 by 5. 1 by 5 is what in terms of percentage is 20%. We know this. 1/5 is 20%. Your answer for this question should be 20%. B is 20% less than A. Very simple. Need not put pen on paper at all. 25% is 1 by 4. I want less. I will reduce the fraction. I will only work on the denominator. So to reduce the fraction, I should increase the denominator. By how much will I increase the denominator? By the value given in the numerator. So 1 by 4 becomes 1 by 4 plus 1, 1 by 5. 1 by 5 is 20%. And similarly, let's say the question is the other way. A is 25% less than B. So by what percentage is B more than A? Right? Opposite of what is given here. A is 25% less than B. And then by what percentage is B more than A? Same process. Whatever we have done here, same thing to be followed. It is just that operation will get reversed. 25% 1 by 4. All good so far. by what percentage b more than a. I want something more, so I have to increase this fraction. Now, I've already told you, always work on the denominator. Whether you have to increase or decrease, always work on the denominator. If you have to increase the fraction, the denominator should be reduced. When you reduce the denominator, the value increases. So, you have to reduce the denominator. So, 1 by 4 will become 1 by 4 minus something. What is that something? The value given in the numerator. 1 by 4 will become 1 by 4 minus 1. 1 by 4 minus 1 is 1 by 3. 1 by 3 is what percentage? 33.33%. So your answer for this question, the second question there, should be 33.33%. Which means if A is 25% less than B, then B will be 33.33% more than A. So this is the SMART technique which you can apply and solve such questions in less than 5 seconds. Right? However, I would suggest that you follow these methods as well. Right? Don't forget the concept here. You can apply this always in the exam, but remember the concept because this is very important. This is just a technique, right? Concept is also important. So multiple ways of solving such questions is most convenient to you, and I'm sure you would like to go ahead with this technique there. Just practice on a few more questions and you'll get a good grip over this technique. Let us now take the second example from model 5 of percentages. The question here is, the sales of company N is 40% less than that of company T. By what percent is the sales of company T more than that of N? So quite similar to what we have done in example 1, right? It is just that N is 40% less than T. So by what percent is T more than N? And like we have discussed in example 1, such questions can be answered in multiple methods, right? 2 or 3 different methods. You can follow the one which is most convenient to you. So let us not discuss all the methods this time. We'll directly apply the SMART method, right? The third method that we have looked at in example 1, right? So let's see how do we answer this question. The first step is to look at the percentage, given percentage, which is 40%. 40% in terms of fraction is equal to 2 by 5. Now, by what percent is the sales of T more than that of N? We are looking for something more, which means we have to increase this fraction. How do you increase the fraction? You always have to work only on the denominator, never touch the numerator. So numerator remains as it is, 2 remains 2. The denominator has to be decreased. If you want the fraction to go up, the value to increase, the denominator should decrease. So 5 will be reduced. By how much? By the value given in the numerator. So numerator is equal to 2. So we'll make it as 2 by 5 minus 2. Now what is 5 minus 2? 3. So this becomes 2 by 3. That's it. 2 by 3 is what in terms of percentage? 66.66%. So your answer for this question has to be 66.66%, which means if N is 40% less than T, then T is 66.66% more than N. As simple as that. Let us now take the sixth model from percentages, where we are supposed to find out the percentage change between two values. Now let us first understand the formula here. Percentage change can always be taken as final value minus initial value by initial value into 100. So whenever we are supposed to find out the percentage change from one value to the other, we can always go for final value minus initial value by initial value into 100. Let's say that the sales of a company in 2 different years is given to us. For example, sales of a company in the year 2001 is X and the sales of the company in 2004 was Y. Then to find out the percentage change between these two values, we can say that the answer should be final value minus initial value by initial value into 100. So the percentage change in the sales of the company from 2001 to 2004 can be taken as the sales in 2004 minus sales in 2001 divided by sales in 2001 into 100. Similarly, if the population of a country is given for various years, let's say the population of a particular country is given from 2001 to 2010. Now to find out the percentage change in population from 2001 to 2010, we can take the answer as final value, that is the population in 2010 minus initial value, the population in 2001 by initial value, that is again the population in 2001 into 100. So this is how whenever we need to find out a percentage change between two values, we always take it as final minus initial by initial value into 100, or that is nothing but the difference of two values. Final minus initial is nothing but the difference of two values by initial value into 100. Now remember friends, percentage change can either be a percentage increase or a percentage decrease. It can be an increase in change or it can be a percentage decrease of change. So here, how do we decide whether the change that we have obtained is a percentage increase or a percentage decrease? That can be decided based on the symbol that can be decided based on the sign of the value. For example, sometimes when we take final minus initial by initial into 100, we may get a negative answer. That negative sign indicates that the change here is a decrease. So whatever value we get, that should be taken as percentage decrease. And if we get a positive answer, then it should be taken as a percentage increase. So whenever we need to find out percentage change or percentage increase or percentage decrease, we simply go for final minus initial by initial into 100. So if the answer is positive, it is a percentage increase, and if it is negative, then it is a percentage decrease. Let us now take an example based on the concept of percentage change that we have learned just now. The question given here is the profit made by a company in the present year is rupees 15 lakhs. 2 years ago, the profit made by the same company was rupees 24 lakhs. What is the percentage change in the profit made by the company? So as you can see here, we know the present profit of the company, that is rupees 15 lakhs, and the profit 2 years ago, which is 24 lakhs. And we are supposed to find out what is the percentage change between these two values. Now we know that percentage change is nothing but final value minus the initial value by initial value into 100. Now in the given question, the final value is nothing but the present profit, which is rupees 15 lakhs. And the initial value is the profit 2 years ago, that is 24 lakhs. So we can say that the percentage change will be 15 lakhs minus 24 lakhs, that is the initial value, divided by 24 lakhs into 100, which is nothing but 15 minus 24 by 24 into 100, as lakhs is common in the numerator and denominator, which is equal to minus 9 by 24 into 100. So this can be taken as 3 by 8. And from the knowledge of fractions in terms of percentages, we know that 3 by 8 will be equal to 37.5%. So the answer here should be minus 37.5%. And this minus sign indicates that the profit has decreased. So we can say that the percentage change in the profit made by the company is 37.5% decrease. So this is nothing but a decrease in the profit. So the answer here is 37.5% decrease. So this is how we can simply use the formula, that is final minus initial by initial into 100, to find out the percentage change between two values. Friends, remember that the concept of percentage change, that is final minus initial by initial into 100, is very, very frequently used when we solve questions from data interpretation. Let us now look at the seventh model from percentages, which is a very, very important concept. Here we try to find out the net percentage change or the effective percentage change when there is a percentage change between two other variables. Let us first understand the formula. The net percentage change or effective percentage change can be calculated as A plus B plus AB by 100%, where A and B are the percentage changes in two variables. So whenever we have percentage changes between two variables and we are supposed to find out the effective percentage change due to these two changes, we can take it as A plus B plus AB by 100%, where A is the percentage change in one of the variables and B is the percentage change in some other variable. Let us take some examples to understand the application of this concept. But remember friends, this is a very, very important concept which will be used in various other topics like simple interest and compound interest and profit and loss. Always net or effective percentage change should be taken as A plus B plus AB by 100%. Let us now take an example based on the concept of net percentage change or overall percentage change that we have discussed just now. The question here is the length of a rectangle increased by 40% and its breadth increased by 20%. What will be the percentage change in the area of the rectangle? So as you can see here, we are supposed to find out the percentage change in the area of the rectangle. Now as discussed in the earlier model, we know that percentage change can always be taken as final value minus initial value by initial value into 100. So the percentage change in the area of the rectangle should be final area of the rectangle minus the initial area of the rectangle by initial area into 100. Now here the length of the rectangle has increased by 40% and the breadth has increased by 20%. Let us assume that the original length of the rectangle is L and its original breadth is B. So the original area of the rectangle A will be equal to length into breadth, that is LB. Now as given in the question, length has increased by 40%. So the new length, let us take it as L dash, will be equal to original length plus 40% of original length. Why? Because it has increased by 40%. So this will be equal to 140% of L. Why? Because L is nothing but 100% of L plus 40% of L. That is 140% of L. And this 140% of L can be taken as 1.4 L. Similarly, the breadth, new breadth B dash will be equal to original breadth B plus the new breadth has increased by 20%. So this will be equal to 20% of B. So this comes out to be 120% of B, which is equal to 1.2 B. So the new area A dash can be taken as L dash into B dash. That is the original length. That is the new length into the new breadth, which is equal to 1.4 L, the new length in terms of original length, into 1.2 B, that is the new breadth in terms of original breadth. By simplifying this, we get 1.68 LB. So this is the original area L into B and the new area is 1.68 LB. Now we need to find out the percentage change in the area of the rectangle. So the percentage change, as discussed earlier, will be equal to final area minus initial area by initial area into 100. The final area is 1.68 LB. So 1.68 LB minus initial area, that is LB, divided by initial area LB into 100. So as LB and LB gets cancelled in the numerator and denominator, we get 1.68 minus 1 by 1 into 100, which is equals to 0.68 into 100, and this can be taken as 68%. But because 0.68 into 100 is 68 and this is a percentage answer, so 68%. So we can say that the area has changed by 68%, and since we have got a positive value here, this 68% is an increment. Why? Because whenever we get a positive sign, this is a percentage increase, and if we get a negative sign, this should be taken as a percentage decrease. So we can say that the area of the rectangle has increased by 68%. But friends, solving the question in this way takes a lot of time. Why? Because a lot of steps are involved and the procedure becomes lengthy. So let us try to solve this question with the help of the concept that we have discussed just now. That is, the net or effective percentage change can be taken as A plus B plus AB by 100%, where A and B are the percentage changes in two variables. If you try to understand the concept here, the area of a rectangle is L into B. That means area of a rectangle is dependent on length and breadth. So as and when the length increases or decreases, the area will also increase or decrease respectively. And similarly, as and when the breadth increases or decreases, the area will be increasing or decreasing respectively. That means very clearly the area is dependent on change in length as well as the change in breadth. Let us assume that the length of the rectangle has changed by A% and the breadth of the rectangle has changed by B%. Now since area is dependent on both length as well as breadth, the net percentage change in area can be taken as A plus B plus AB by 100%. So change in area will be equal to A plus B plus AB by 100%, where A is the percentage change in length and B is the percentage change in breadth. So here the percentage change in area can be directly calculated as A plus B plus AB by 100, where A equals to 40, B is equal to 20. So 40 plus 20 plus 40 into 20 by 100%. So by simplifying this, zeros anyway get cancelled. We get 40 plus 20, that is 60, plus 4 into 2 is 8, which is equal to 68%. And since this is a positive value, we can say that this is an increase in the area. So the final answer here will be 68% increase. So as you can see here, we can directly get the answer as 68% increment without doing all these steps. So always remember, whenever you have a case where a particular parameter like area here is dependent on two other variables, the net or effective percentage can be taken as A plus B plus AB by 100%. Let us now understand what would be the answer or how to calculate the answer when the length and the breadth decreases by some percentage. For example, let's say length has decreased by 40% and the breadth also has decreased by 20%. Even in this case, the formula to be used should be A plus B plus AB by 100%. But the only difference is now A should be taken as minus 40 because the length has decreased. So we get a negative change. So A should be taken as minus 40 and B should be taken as minus 20. And the formula will be A plus B plus AB by 100%. So the new answer, in case if the length and breadth decreases by 40 and 20% respectively, will be equal to minus 40 minus 20 plus minus 40 into minus 20 by 100. As you can see here, the formula is same, A plus B plus AB by 100. But the only point is A and B both are negative in nature. So this will be equal to minus 60, and this will be minus 4 into minus 2 plus 8. Minus 60 plus 8 is minus 52%. And since we have got a negative sign, it indicates that this is a decrease. So the answer here will be 52% decrease. So when both length and breadth have decreased by 40 and 20% respectively, the area will decrease by 52%. And likewise, let's say length has decreased by some percentage and the breadth has increased by some percentage. So the formula to be used should be A plus B plus AB by 100. But in case of A, we should take a negative value because length has decreased, and B should be taken as a positive value because breadth has increased. And similarly, if the length has increased and breadth has decreased, the opposite changes can be taken and the answer can be obtained as A plus B plus AB by 100%. So friends, try to be smart, avoid using the lengthy procedure and directly try to get the answer with the help of A plus B plus AB by 100% as the formula wherever applicable. Let us now take one more example based on the concept of net or effective percentage change. The question here is, the revenue of a shop in the month of March was rupees 40,000. In the month of April, the shopkeeper announced a discount of 20% and hence his sales went up by 20%. What will be the revenue in the month of April? So as you can see here, the revenue in the month of March, that is the original revenue, is 40,000. In the month of April, as the shopkeeper announced a discount, that is a decrease in price by 20%, his sales went up by 20%. So what will be the effect on the revenue of the shopkeeper? And we have to find out the revenue in the month of April. One important point to be noted here is, because the price has decreased by 20% and hence the sales increased by 20%, doesn't mean that there will not be any effect on the revenue. Do not mark the answer as 40,000 again, thinking that there will not be any change in the revenue. Here definitely there will be some change in the revenue which can be calculated as net or effective percentage or A plus B plus AB by 100%. We know that revenue is nothing but price into quantity. Now as you can see here, the shopkeeper has announced a discount of 20%. That means very clearly the price has decreased by 20%, and a decrease of 20% should be taken as minus 20%. And because of that, the quantity or the sales went up by 20%. Went up by 20% means what? An increase of 20%, which should be taken as plus 20%. And we are supposed to find out the effect on revenue. Now as you can see here, again revenue is dependent on price as well as quantity. So as and when the price and quantity changes, the revenue will also change. And that percentage change can be taken as A plus B plus AB by 100. Where A is the percentage change in price and B is the percentage change in quantity. So we can say that the revenue will be affected by, or the change in revenue will be equal to A plus B plus AB by 100%. That is the net or effective percentage change, where A is equal to minus 20 and B is equals to plus 20. So minus 20 plus 20 plus minus 20 into plus 20 divided by 100. So minus 20 and plus 20 gets cancelled, and here we get the answer as minus 4, minus 4%. So from this minus 4%, we can understand that the revenue in the month of April has decreased by 4% when compared to the revenue in the month of March. And as the question says, what will be the revenue in the month of April? We can say that the revenue in April should be equal to the original revenue, that is 40,000 minus 4%. Why? Because the change has been a decrease of 4%. So minus 4% of same 40,000. So this will be equal to 40,000 minus 4% of 40,000 is equal to 1600. So this is 38,400. So the revenue in the month of April will be 38,400 rupees. So friends, this is how you can use the concept of overall or effective percentage change to find out the new revenue or the new population, as the case may be. Let us now take another interesting question from percentages, which is again based on the concept of net percentage change. Let us look at the question first. The price of sugar increased by 25%. what should be the percentage decrease in the consumption of sugar by a family such that their expenditure on sugar remains the same. So as you can see here, the price of sugar has increased by 25%. And now we need to find out by what percentage should the consumption decrease so that expenditure on the sugar remains same. Let us first understand what is meant by expenditure. Expenditure can always be taken as price into quantity. For example, let's say that the price of sugar is 20 rupees per kg and the quantity that we have bought is 5 kgs. So the expenditure will be 20 into 5, that is equal to 100 rupees. So expenditure is nothing but price into quantity. If you try to understand, expenditure is same as revenue. Revenue also is price into quantity as discussed in the previous example. But the only difference here is revenue is from the shopkeeper's point of view and expenditure is from the customer's point of view. So here expenditure is price into quantity. Now if you try to understand, even in this case, if the price changes by A% and the quantity changes by B%, the change in expenditure should be taken as A plus B plus AB by 100%, as it is nothing but a effective percentage change due to price and quantity together. Now if we observe the question here, price of sugar has increased by 25%. So very clearly A here is nothing but 25. And we are supposed to find out what should be the percentage decrease in the consumption of sugar. The consumption here is nothing but the quantity. So what should be the decrease in quantity? That means B should be calculated. The percentage change in B or the percentage change in quantity has to be calculated such that expenditure remains same. Expenditure remains same means what? It is nothing but the old expenditure should be equal to the new expenditure. So very clearly, as there is no change in expenditure, the overall change here in expenditure can be taken as 0% because old expenditure and new expenditure are equal. So when they are equal, there won't be any change, or the change can be taken as 0%. So very clearly, A plus B plus AB by 100% is equal to 0. A is equal to 25 and B has to be calculated. So we can say that A plus B plus AB by 100, that is the change in expenditure is 0 since the expenditure remains same. A is 25, that is the price has increased by 25%. So A should be taken as 25 and B has to be calculated. So this will be 25 into B by 100, which is equal to 0, and this goes 4 times. So we can say that 25 plus B plus B by 4 will be 5B by 4 equals to 0. So from this 5B by 4 equals to minus 25, or B can be taken as, this is minus 5 times into 4, minus 20. So B is minus 20%, and minus sign indicates what? Decrease. So we can say that B should decrease by 20%. So the quantity or the consumption should decrease by 20% so that expenditure remains same when the price has increased by 25%. So as you can understand from this example, friends, the only difference is in the previous two cases, A and B were given and we were supposed to calculate the overall or net percentage change. But in this case, overall change has been specified and A has been given and we are supposed to find out the value of B. So simply use the concept of net percentage change or effective percentage change in these kind of cases to get the required answer. Let us now take some typical examples from percentages. Let us look at the first question. A student has to secure 40% marks to pass an examination. He secured 75 marks and was declared fail by 45 marks. Find the maximum marks set for the examination. So as you can see here, a student must get 40% marks to pass the exam. He has scored 75 marks, but still he was declared fail by 45 marks. We are supposed to find out the maximum marks, that is nothing but 100% of the marks that can be scored in this examination. Now, we know that the pass percentage is 40 because a student has to get 40% marks to pass this exam. Now, he has got 75 marks and he failed by 45 marks. So, very clearly, this 40% should be equal to 75 marks plus 45 marks. Why? Because he has already secured 75. If he gets 45 more, he will pass the exam. So 75 plus 45 is nothing but the passing mark. So 75 plus 45 is equal to 120. So we can understand that 40% is equivalent to 120. And we are supposed to find out the maximum marks. Let us assume that the maximum marks are m, which is equivalent to 100%. So this should be equal to what? As you can see here, we know that 40% is 120, 100% should be what? So by cross multiplication, we get the required answer. So we can say that the maximum marks here would be 100 into 120 divided by 40. As 40 goes 3 times here, the maximum marks will be equal to 3 into 100, 300. So this is how we can solve these type of questions, by finding out what is the passing marks, and from which we can get the required maximum marks. Let us now take one more typical example from percentages. The question here is 75% of a number when added to 75 becomes the number itself. What is the number? So appears to be a little complicated, but this is a very simple question. Let us assume that the number which it is talking about is x. Now the question says 75% of a number, that means 75% of x when added to 75, that means this value 75% of x when added to 75 becomes the number itself. That means the sum of these two should be equal to the number itself, that is nothing but x. And we are supposed to find out what is the number. So by simplifying this equation, we get the required answer. We know that x is nothing but 100% of itself, that is x is equal to 100% of x. So here 100% of x minus 75% of x is equal to 75. So we know that 25% of x is equal to 75. So from this, x will be equal to 75 into 100 by 25, which is equal to 300. So we can say that the number here is 300. If we can understand the question properly, we need not write the first two steps. We can directly say that 25% of x is equal to 75. Why? Because as we can see here, 75% of a number when added to 75 becomes the number itself. We very well understand that 75% of a number should always be added to 25% of that number so that it becomes the number itself. So very clearly, this 75 here is nothing but 25% of this number. So we can directly say 25% is 75 and 100% is equal to what, or the number is equal to what. And by cross multiplication or taking 25% on the other side, we get the answer as 300. Let us now take one more interesting question from percentages. The question here is, in a test consisting of 300 questions, Deepika answered 40% of the first 100 questions correctly. What percent of the remaining 200 questions does she need to answer correctly for her grade in the entire exam to be 50%? So as you can see here, the total number of questions in the test are 300. Deepika has answered 40% of the first 100 questions correctly. What percent of the remaining 200 questions does she need to answer correctly for her grade in the entire exam to be 50%? That means in the overall exam, she has to answer 50% of the questions correctly. Let us first understand what should be her overall performance. Overall, it should be 50% of the total number of questions, as it is given in the question that her overall grade should be 50%. So 50% of the total number of questions, 300, will be equal to 150. That means very clearly, Deepika should answer 150 questions correctly to get 50% as her grade in the exam. Now we know that she has answered 40% of the first 100 questions correctly. So 40% of 100 is nothing but 40. That means very clearly, out of first 100 questions, 40 questions have been answered correctly. So now we know that overall Deepika should answer 150 questions correctly, and already she has answered 40 questions correct from the first 100 questions. That means there are 110 more questions. That is nothing but the difference of 150 and 40, which is equal to 110. So there should be 110 correct questions. So there should be 110 questions that she needs to answer correctly to get the grade of 50%. Now left out questions are 200. The remaining questions are 200. So very clearly, out of these 200 remaining questions, 110 questions have to be correct. So we need to find out what percent of the remaining questions does she need to answer correctly. So that is nothing but this 110 is what percentage of 200. So So 110 is what percentage of 200 is in the form of x is what percent of y. And we know that x is what percent of y should be taken as x by y into 100. So 110 is what percent of 200 is to be calculated. We know that x is what percent of y should be taken as x by y into 100. So 110 by 200 into 100, which comes out to be 55%. So we can say that out of the remaining 200 questions, she need to answer 55% of the questions correctly, so that her overall grade can be 50%. So the simple idea here is, we know that the overall grade is 50%, so the number of questions would be 150. 150 questions must be answered correctly. Already out of first 100, she has answered 40% of the questions correctly. That means 40 questions are correct. So the remaining 110 questions that are to be correct have to be from the left out 200 questions. So we need to decide this 110 is what percent of 200, which can be taken as 110 by 200 into 100, and the answer comes out to be 55%. That's all from percentages. Remember friends, as I've already mentioned, this is one of the most important topics from quantitative aptitude. So practice well on all the various types of models that we have discussed, so that solving questions from other topics will become easy for you. See you in the next session. Thank you.